I read the Old Testament of the Bible a lot because in the Old Testament I get to interact with real people who have real issues, who are grappling with personal weaknesses and going through life, learning lessons, making mistakes. In the Old Testament, it's not about the gospel through word. And indeed, it's not always about miracles. And it's not a short-term thing. I study people's lives, where they were born, when they were born, why they were born. I get to know about their brothers, maybe their sisters, their parents, and even the lineage. I get into their lives and I see them struggling with everything. And it makes more meaning to me because it's real life. So I love the Old Testament for that. And I've read it maybe more than 10 times. One of my favorite characters in the Old Testament is King David. We see him being born in a family of about 7 or 8. And he is quite gifted in his own way, although he also has his own weaknesses. And we see him, being the shepherd, and we see the prophet coming, and for the first time we hear about this guy who is not very, very popular in his own home, except popular with God. And we are introduced to him as this ruddy, good-looking young man. And he's an interesting person as we study him because he struggles with a few things. But in his heart, there is a warrior, there's a lion in him that keeps him going through the vicissitudes, through the pains, through the happenings and episodes of life. And I admire how he takes things, how he looks at life situations. I love the way he likes music and how he does his psalms. I love the way he sits at the palace of the king. And when the king is tormented, he uses his gift to return sanity to the madness of the king. Until there comes a time when he begins receiving rejection. And we start feeling sorry for him. David was pursued. He fought about 68 wars. And he was pursued by his enemies, whom he hadn't wronged in any given way. People who are driven by just sheer jealousy or just being wicked themselves pursued this guy and always wanted to destroy him. And there is a particular Psalm, number 27, where he talks about the enemies who came following him to eat up his flesh. And when he saw the enemy running towards him, he knew he was finished. But just before he was devoured by this vicious, most wicked enemy, the enemy stumbled and fell. And he said, when my enemies and mine adversaries came to eat up my flesh, they stumbled and fell. But there is a particular verse in that chapter 27 that was written by King David, where he says, I had fainted. It was too much for him. And he almost fainted. He didn't faint, but he says, I had fainted unless I had believed to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. That is in 27 verse 13. He says, I had fainted unless I had believed to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. I have indeed met people who have given up in life until they reminisce about heaven. They are so bent to going to heaven, and they have nothing to do with this world. My father was almost like that. He did not fight for things of this world. He was so bent to going home. And finally, when he was ready to go home, he gathered his family around his bed, and he said, please, can you let your servant rest? Can you just let me go home? And everybody was quiet, and I said, Dad, go home. And he finally rested. He really wanted to go home. And I have met people who really sing heavenly songs. If there is this gospel of singing about heaven, it's more in Africa. And I've studied Tanzania. I'm planning to go to Tanzania, by the way. I have been to Uganda several times, but I'm thinking about visiting Tanzania. And I could be going to Tanzania maybe in December. I just want to go to Tanzania. I have been there once. But I listen a lot to their gospel music. And there is a lot of singing about heaven in their lyrics. They make me want to go to heaven and rest from the cares of this world and not have to face the wrath of life and to see the suffering of the least of these. It is so tempting to think about heaven when things are not going very right, and either in your life or if you have some love in the lives of others. And David looked at life differently. And he said, I would have fainted unless I had believed to see God's goodness in the land of the living, not in the afterlife. He believed in goodness, besides the rejection that was following him so menacingly, besides the most powerful man in Israel pursuing him and wanting to kill him, besides the Philistines taking over the ark of the tabernacle and going away with the presence of God, the Shekinah glory leaving Israel. He almost fainted. But through it all, he learned to believe in the goodness of the Lord before he died. And in verse 14 he said, wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and he shall strengthen thine heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. And those words have echoed mercy, the seeds of mercy in my heart. And they encourage me to pick up my tattered pieces and keep going, trusting in the goodness of the Lord in this land of the living. I would have fainted. Now, talking about me, I would have fainted had I not believed in the goodness of the Lord. In all the morass, in all the bad things I have seen in Africa, because I can tell you for free that Africa is in a mess. The systems have failed. Nothing makes sense. The poor who have nothing are taxed through the nose, paying a lot of money that goes to the wealthy, to the politicians, funding their foreign trips and their retreats with their girlfriends. It is so sickening seeing the things that happen, the way the poor have been rejected. They even go to the hospital and there is no medication. If they cannot pay a lot of money and they don't have insurance, then they can't be treated. I'm just about to go. I came with a man who had a tropical ulcer, and he has a rotting finger that has pus. And the other finger is also being affected. His name is Isaiah. He is about 70 years. And he went to a hospital. And because he didn't have money, he was asked by the nurses or maybe doctors, those medical practitioners, to go home. What they simply asked, what they normally do is to ask you, do you have money? And when you don't have money, then they'll have nothing to do with you. And I see these things and they hurt me exceedingly. And they make me cry. Because as you send him home, whom are you sending him home for? What will treat him? He will die. And so we brought him to the hospital, to a private hospital, and the doctor looked at him and he had to spend around in a hotel room. And I'm just about to leave after shooting this video. I'm going to take him and he will have a minor surgery. Had I not brought him here for treatment, that man would die. The tropical ulcer would bring an infection that will affect him up to the heart. And the man would die and people would come and bury him and hold this huge funeral service, buy him a cascade, put him in a black suit and a white shirt and a red tie, and have him buried and talk about God having called his own, and a lot of crap that people speak when they did not help the person, when they were not responsible enough. Makes me sick. And I do these things and I want to faint. But then I hold my peace because I know the Lord is there. And in all these details, his hand is very much present. Even in jiggers, his hand is present there. Can you imagine the Lord being present in the jigger details? That his goodness, his love is still manifest in that horror, in that terror. And you cannot realize that until you meet Angelica from Mexico. And you see her embracing the jiggered babies and washing the feet of jiggered mothers. That is when you will begin seeing the details, in the details, the goodness of God. Love that is unconditional, coming from a strange place, a far off land from Mexico. And so I'll speak some more because I feel I'm so pregnant in my heart. The Lord has been dropping some things inside my heart, and I'll continue sharing. Even if nobody listens, I will listen to them and they'll bless me. Of course, I don't do these things because of human accolades. I'm really not interested in human accolades because I've had enough of them. Every single day, people who watch my videos will speak wonderful things about me. And they'll tell me very, very special things. And I will receive these very special emails from people who admire me. And so it's no longer my motivation, if ever, that motivated me to do what I try to do. I think there is something that God wants my life to do. And I'll try to pursue that as much as I can. So, dear friends, bear with me and walk with me. And if you can, drop a word, drop a line, and let us get into a discussion, a conversation that might just help somebody in the nick of time. Thank you for your indulgence, and God bless you.